Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Let's Move Austin. I'm Chris Angel, your co-host, here with Teresa Bastion. Teresa.
Hello.
Howdy. So today we're talking about what are these closing costs that I keep hearing about?
Well, I'm glad you asked. When we're going to focus today on the closing costs for buyers. Okay. So when you buy a home, you generally pay, the down payment amount.
Right.
But there's other costs.
What?
And I have sometimes met with people that were a little surprised they had to have more cash than just their down payment.
Yeah.
I tend to have this conversation with people real early on. But I thought this might be a good opportunity to put the information out there so that more people can learn about closing costs.
Yeah, I think it's a smart way to help people prepare for the process of buying a home, for sure.
Absolutely. Last thing you want to do is fall in love with a house and figure out you needed a couple more $1,000. It's not a good feeling.
So can we start with what it is? Like, what are they? Closing costs.
Well, I'm going to answer because I'm in Austin, Texas. So this is kind of Texas centered. It may be slightly different in another state, but in Austin, the closing costs include things like your lender's title insurance policy. Okay. So that's required if you have a mortgage on a property and the buyer pays for that. It's typically a couple $100, kind of varies based on the total price of the property. Another one is escrow fees. Escrow is when you actually go in to sign the papers, the escrow company makes sure that everything's in order, that everything gets recorded properly with the county and all that. And that fee is generally split 50-50 between the buyer and the seller. So it ends up to be about $350 that the buyer is responsible for.
Yep.
I mentioned recording fees. There are a handful of, this deed has to go there and this has to go there at the county. So those are generally pretty low dollar amount items, but they add up. I mean, we don't want to omit them.
Yeah.
What else is there? Well, we talked about the lender's title insurance policy. There's also an owner's title insurance policy that's generally quite a lot more expensive. That one I almost always can negotiate for the seller to pay, but it is possible that the buyer could have to pay it. Very not usual.
Yeah.
You're going to have to pay for your appraisal, and that's before you even buy the house, and that's generally about $500.
Does that show up on closing costs typically, or will the lender bill you?
It'll be actually billed by the lender, and assuming there's a mortgage, but it is something that I like to mention when I talk about closing costs, because if you are counting on that $500 to be there, you got to budget for it.
Yep. That's good. Smart. So, so there are these closing costs. So then when are they due?
Sure. Appraisal, we kind of talked about as a bit of a side note, and that's due fairly early in the process after your offer's been accepted.
Yeah.
But these closing costs are due at the end. Like, you can't complete the purchase of your house without paying for the title insurance or the escrow fee.
Yep.
So they will be documented on a closing statement. You'll have time to review it, but you have to have that money in addition to your down payment.
Does escrow, before I come in to sign at escrow, does escrow tell me the number I need to bring in, like in a cashier's check or something, or?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. We should do a whole episode on cashier's checks and wire fraud. So let's make a note of that for later. Don't let that scare you now. But yes, once you know the price of the home you're purchasing, and I am working with your lender, because typically people don't pay cash, that's fine.
Right.
I should be able to, with that lender's information, we should be able to give you a pretty good estimate of your closing costs by like the second week you're under contract.
Yeah.
And we can give you a broader estimate without knowing the actual sales price before you even start shopping.
Yep.
The escrow company, because they are the ones that have the official paperwork, it takes a little longer for them to produce the document. That's why I like to do it for my clients much earlier in the process. But you'll get your numbers at least 3 days before closing to review and, get a cashier's check or whatever.
I can't remember that. Can you bring in just a normal personal check, or does it need to be in a cashier's check?
Great question. Yeah, no, to buy a house, it has to be a cashier's check or a wire transfer. They don't want a duffel bag full of cash, and they don't want a personal check.
They want a paper trail.
They do. And that's actually something I wanted to bring up. Sometimes people don't have very much cash, but they have great credit and they can afford the payment. You can have your closing costs, you could have someone in your life gift money to you for that purpose.
Oh,
sometimes I've
nice.
had, clients that have parents in another state or, an uncle, the rich uncle. But so that can be done. There's a certain way to do it so they can track it, just like you said, with a paper trail.
Yeah.
So if you're planning to have any of the money gifted to you, number one, you're lucky. Number two, talk to me early so we make sure it comes into your account the way that they're going to need to verify it.
Yeah. And that, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think like that differs from, say, like down payments. Like sometimes lenders might want to see that your down payment is what they call seasoned.
Yeah.
Like that it's been living in the account for a while and you didn't just like, is that true or is that changed or?
It's definitely true. And I don't like to give a blanket statement about how many days they need to see it. I like to say it kind of goes lender by lender. And ever since, the mortgage meltdown several years ago, things are a lot stricter and there's good reason for it to be strict, but we just need to have that conversation with the actual lender you're using to get the actual right information. That one I can't predict on. But yeah, you can't just show up, with a cashier's check written out from your grandma to the seller. That's me.
Yeah, there's some guidelines.
But there's a process to do it properly.
Yeah, that's the point. There's a process to do it properly. And in order to find out those answers, you just like talking to you and you working with the lender to get like to translate everything so people understand. I think sometimes too, actually, it's another point. Sometimes lenders can just use lender language, and I think sometimes things can get lost in translation because I've met more than one buyer who have been confused by what they were really supposed to do.
Well, I think another thing, I agree with that. Or, any of us that are in a certain profession run the danger of using our lingo. We talk about it so much, your closing costs. Well, what are they exactly?
Right.
It's helpful to break it down.
Yeah.
I think another thing that I see buyers get confused about when you talk about their finances and towards closing, it's not technically a closing cost, but if you have a loan, a mortgage, they're going to require you to have like 2 months of reserves in your escrow account. They're probably going to require you to pay for the first year of homeowners insurance up front. So that could be $1,000, say, for the homeowners insurance.
Wow.
If they want 2 months of your property taxes in escrow, that could be another couple grand. So it's your money, but they're holding it over here.
Right.
And you have to come up with that before you can buy the house.
Yeah. And
sometimes I don't think that really registers.
Yeah. I think so. So if you're listening to this, first of all, don't panic that there's these costs, but do get in a conversation with somebody like Teresa, right? Where you can actually start to figure out what is it really going to take to move down the road for the kind of house that you want to buy.
Absolutely. And it's so important to work with someone that you feel is explaining things at the level you need them explained. Yeah. I work with several different lenders. And one reason I have built these relationships with different people is some of them are super detail oriented and might be a match for a client that, craves that level of data. Mm-hmm. Some are more like, here's just the facts. Here's the big picture. And that, doesn't overwhelm, clients who may not understand everything. They just need to know the bottom line. So we can match you with someone that will, explain things the way you desire them to be explained.
Yeah. I think that's really important. Like when you're in this type of a big transaction, having a team around the transaction that you can trust because there's chemistry there is really important. Yeah, if there isn't chemistry and you don't trust people, then sometimes I've seen it multiple times where people will sabotage the transaction just because they're trying to maintain control because it feels safer to maintain control because they don't trust the team.
Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, you should work with people you trust.
That's probably another episode, but
I'll make a note of that one too.
Yeah. It's good. Any other thoughts on closing costs?
Can I leave? What did you say?
Any other thoughts on closing costs?
I would like to leave with a very positive possibility.
Okay.
Did you know that it's possible to negotiate a transaction where the seller would pay your closing costs?
What?
All these costs I just told you about that you have to have all this cash ready for?
Oh, I just took a deep breath.
It is possible to negotiate that the seller will pay them.
Wow.
It doesn't always work. It's a negotiable point, but I will go to the wall to try to get a seller to pay them.
Yes.
Okay. And so sometimes, let's say the house is priced at $300,000. You're the buyer, you need $6,000 for closing costs estimate. Maybe we write the offer on the house for $306,000. See what I did?
Yeah.
Seller is making the same as a full priced offer.
Yep.
That money is just going to you to buy the house.
Right.
So your mortgage would be $6,000 higher, but that's like going to be 12 cents a day probably or something.
Amortized over 30 years.
In the comments. I know I did the math wrong, but over the length of a 30-year mortgage, a couple thousand is no big deal.
Yeah.
In the life of you, that couple thousand could make the difference between being able to repaint and do carpet and get furniture and fun stuff with your new house.
Right.
So I always try to make that work for my clients.
Yeah, so good. That's smart. Thank you for bringing that up. I almost forgot about that. I'm getting rusty.
Nah. We can put you in a new house, Chris. Do we do that? We need to talk about a move?
Yeah, to Austin.
Everybody's doing it.
Austin's amazing. Awesome. Well, this is a good episode, Teresa. Closing costs. Thank you. Thank you for your time,
welcome.
Your wisdom.
Thanks for talking about kind of a boring topic, but it's super important.
It is important. If people want to talk to you about the process of buying, like how do I get started? Like what do I look for? Yeah. What do I need? Whatever. How do they contact you?
Absolutely. And I can also run an estimated buyer's closing cost sheet. So if you think you want to be in the $300,000 range, I can actually print out in detail what those costs are. So I can do that for anybody. You don't have to be actively house hunting right now. If you're just curious, give me a call, 512-297-3442.
Awesome. Teresa, thank you so much. I will catch you next time.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.